Two men walk past the edge of the cultivated gardens. The dirt crunches under leather sandals. The wind moves through the tall, wild grass. Same location. Again and again. Most people assume the wilderness is the most dangerous place in the Bible. The human defenses are going to fail. The great stone temple is going to burn. The protected spaces are finished. But God is staking his claim on the open ground. Jeremiah declares that houses and fields and vineyards will again be bought in this land. The vulnerability of the SADEH is exactly where the restoration will begin. The ground that looks dead, the ground that is utterly exposed to the enemy, is the exact ground that holds the future. God anchors the hope of Israel not in the fortified city, but in the occupied field. The SADEH holds a promise that outlasts the empire. Centuries pass. The Babylonians fall. The Romans rise. The empires change. But the pattern of the open ground remains entirely consistent. Because hundreds of years later, Jesus of Nazareth will stand on a hillside, looking out over the dirt. And he will tell a very short story about a SADEH that flips the economy of heaven upside down. Matthew chapter 13, verse 44. Jesus is delivering a rapid-fire sequence of images about what the kingdom of heaven is actually like. He does not point to a temple. He does not point to a palace or a heavily guarded fortress. He points right back to the exact same vulnerable landscape that has defined the biblical story from the beginning. We think of the desert, the dry, waterless places where prophets fast and Israelites wander. And the desert does carry that weight sometimes. The kingdom of heaven is like treasure hidden in a field, which a man found and covered up. Then, in his joy, he goes and sells all that he has and buys that field. When we read this short parable, we almost always focus entirely on the treasure. We imagine the sudden glint of gold beneath the dark soil, the heavy, hollow thud of a wooden chest struck by an iron plow, the frantic scraping of dirt with bare hands to uncover a fortune. That changes everything. We focus on the immense, staggering value of what was found in the ground. But look closely at the actual transaction. The man does not just pocket the treasure and run back to the safety of the city. He hides it again. He goes home, liquidates every single possession he has to his name. And he buys the field. He buys the dirt. He buys the open, unprotected expanse. The Greek word Matthew uses here is agros, the exact cultural and linguistic equivalent of the Hebrew SADEH, the unwalled territory outside the city limits. To possess the treasure, the man is forced to purchase the vulnerability. He has to take legal ownership of the exact location where thieves can strike in the dark, where the midday heat beats down without mercy. But if you look closer, the desert is merely empty. The real danger, the real exposure, happens somewhere entirely different, where there are no heavy timber gates to lock when danger approaches. To everyone else walking by, it just looks like a worthless, dangerous plot of land. Only the buyer knows what is buried underneath the exposure. The kingdom of heaven is not a fortified citadel you retreat into. It is an exposed field you purchase with your whole life. Jesus is fundamentally diagnosing and subverting the core human desire for safety. We want the profound treasure of God, but we want it kept securely inside a vault. We want the blessing, the redemption, and the presence, but we want it safely behind a high stone wall where nothing can ever threaten our comfort or our control. But the biblical pattern refuses to cooperate with our engineering. The greatest encounters and the ultimate treasures are never found in the places where we have guaranteed our own security. They are buried in the spaces where we have no defenses left. And this is not just an ancient agricultural metaphor designed for first-century farmers. The exact same dynamics of the SADEH are operating right now, defining the deepest struggles of our modern experience. We do not walk in leather sandals across the ancient Near East. We do not hear the dry crunch of leftover barley stalks. We do not scan the physical horizon for raiding parties. But you know this exact location. You have stood in the SADEH. It happens in the space between the city and the wild. And understanding what happens in this space changes how you read every major turning point. You spend your entire life building walls. You construct the perfect career, You pad the savings account. You curate the public reputation. You buy the insurance. You check the deadbolts. You build a fortress of predictability. You engineer a life where nothing can surprise you. And then the phone rings at midnight. You hear a diagnosis you did not expect. You watch a relationship shatter into pieces. You feel the heavy, hollow silence of an empty house. The walls collapse. The fortress is gone. You are shoved out into the open ground. You feel the sharp wind of absolute uncertainty. You feel the cold glare of a hospital room light. You feel the tight, suffocating grip in your chest. You are exposed. You have no defenses left. You have no control. Most of us view this exposure as a curse. We treat vulnerability as a tragic accident. We assume that if the walls fall, God has abandoned us to the wild beasts. We panic in the field. We scramble in the dirt. We try to stack up broken stones to hide behind. We beg God for a new wall. But God does not build you a new wall. He meets you in the open. The modern field is not a failure of your planning. It is the stripping away of your illusions. It is the exact place where your own engineering finally stops. From the book of Genesis all the way to the parables of Jesus. The central question of these ancient stories isn't simply, will you survive? It is the geography where real reliance actually begins. Isaac did not build a bunker to wait for his bride. Ruth did not demand a fortress to gather her grain. Jeremiah did not wait for the Babylonian siege to lift before he bought the dirt. They surrendered to the SADEH. You think you are standing in a wasteland. You think the open ground is going to kill you. You look desperately for a place to hide. But the treasure is never in the fortress. The redemption is never in the walled city. The encounter never happens behind a locked gate. You must purchase the field. You must accept the vulnerability. You must stand in the tall grass and wait to see what comes over the horizon. But to truly grasp the scale of what is happening when you stand in that exposure, you have to look at the oldest book in the biblical canon, because long before the prophets bought land, a celestial courtroom was already debating the exact same vulnerable ground. Picture the scene in the oldest text of the Hebrew Scriptures. A group of celestial beings gather in the divine council. The accuser walks in, dust on his sandals from roaming the earth. God points to a man named Job, highlighting his blameless life. It is this. Who are you when the walls disappear? To feel the weight of this question, you have to step out of the fortified cities. And the accuser scoffs. He does not deny that Job is a righteous man. Instead, he points directly to the architectural boundaries surrounding him. Have you not put a hedge around him and his house and all that he has? On every side, the accuser identifies a wall. He recognizes that Job is completely insulated from the SADEH, the unwalled expanse where bandits roam, where predators hunt, and where the elements destroy. The accuser's argument is devastatingly simple. He claims that human devotion is nothing more than a transaction for safety. Job only trusts you because you keep him out of the dangerous field. Tear down the hedge. Expose him to the wild, and his faith will evaporate into the desert wind. So the wall is removed. In a matter of hours, Job is dragged out into the ultimate exposure. Sabaean raiders sweep across the open plains and slaughter his servants. A sudden, violent wind collapses the four corners of a house, crushing his children. He is reduced to sitting in the cold ashes, scraping his diseased skin with a jagged piece of broken pottery. He has no wealth, no children, no health, and no divine protection. He is standing in the absolute center of the SADEH, entirely vulnerable to the forces that the hedge once kept at bay. Most people read this narrative as a terrifying example of divine unpredictability. They view the collapse of Job's hedge as a tragedy that we must blindly accept. Of the ancient Near East, you have to strip away the stone walls, the heavy timber gates, the archers standing watch on the parapets. But the book of Job is not a story about a cruel cosmic wager. It is the ultimate vindication of the exposed ground. Job sits in the ashes and screams into the silence. He demands an audience with the Creator. He curses the day he was born, but he does not walk away. He endures the terrifying reality of the unprotected expanse. proving to the celestial courtroom that human trust can actually survive without the guarantee of human safety. The accuser was certain that the field would destroy him, assuming that a man stripped of his fortress would inevitably curse his maker. But the field only revealed the indestructible nature of a faith that does not require a wall to survive. This radical exposure weaves its way through every generation, tying the entire biblical narrative into one seamless thread of vulnerability and grace. And when you pull back to look at the whole tapestry, you finally see exactly what the open ground was meant to accomplish. A brother walked into the open dirt, and the first blood cried out from the ground. A blameless man watched his hedge collapse, and trust survived in the cold ashes. A patriarch stood in the evening silence, and his future arrived on the horizon. A foreign widow gathered stalks in the margins, and she stepped into a royal bloodline. In the ancient world, a wall meant survival. Inside, you had law. You had community. You had a guaranteed defense. A weeping prophet bought a war-torn plot of land, and he anchored the hope of a captive nation. A traveler found a secret in the soil, and he sold everything to possess the vulnerability. A carefully engineered fortress falls apart, and we finally discover the treasure hidden in the exposure. Same location, same God. But maybe the part that stays with me most is the 17 shekels of silver. Jeremiah, pressing his signet ring into the hot clay, right when the stone walls of his city were buckling. He did not wait for the Babylonian siege to lift. He did not wait for God to build a new fortress before he trusted the promise. He bought the war zone. He purchased the exposure. If you are in a season where the walls have collapsed, if you are standing in the SADEH, feeling the sharp wind of uncertainty and begging God to build a new fortress to hide behind, stop scrambling in the dirt. The lack of a wall is not proof of your abandonment. It is the prerequisite for your encounter. You cannot find the treasure if you refuse to leave the city. Outside, you were entirely exposed to the elements, to thieves, to the whims of whoever was stronger than you. If this opened something in you, subscribe. Leave a comment. Even one word helps. Share this with someone who feels entirely exposed right now. Pray for us as we keep digging into these texts. And may the God who has never once abandoned the open field walk with you into the unwalled margins of your life and show you the treasure buried in the exact place you were most afraid of. The field is not just a piece of agricultural property. It is the theater of human vulnerability. They are walking away from the tents, away from the fire pits, away from the watchful eyes of the only other humans on the earth. It is the place where you can be murdered by your own brother without a single witness to hear you scream. But remarkably, it is also the place where you might stumble upon a treasure so vast that you sell everything you own, just to buy the dirt it sits in. To understand how a single location can hold so much death and so much life, you have to look at the language itself, because there is a specific word, the Hebrew, authors use to describe this unprotected ground, a word that holds a dual reality hidden right in its root. Genesis chapter 4, verse 8. The ancient narrative gives us a very specific staging for the first act of human violence. The text says that Cain spoke to his brother Abel, and when they were in the field, Cain rose up and killed him. The word your English Bible translates as field here is the Hebrew SADEH. It appears over 300 times in the Hebrew scriptures, and its range of meaning is wider and far more dangerous than our modern equivalent. When we hear the English word field, we picture a green meadow, a picket fence, a quiet place for a picnic. But the ancient SADEH is a completely different landscape. They step into the wide open expanse, carrying a sudden, violent jealousy, and then a stone is picked up. You can hear it strike. It is the vast, unwalled expanse of land outside the boundary of human settlement. It is the territory of the wild beast, the bandit, and the brutal heat of the noon sun beating down with zero shade. When you step into the SADEH, you feel the sharp wind sweeping across the plains without windbreaks. You smell the raw dust of crushed stalks beneath your feet. You are entirely visible to the horizon. There is nowhere to hide, We see this exact word used to define a human life. Just a few generations later in Genesis 25, the text describes two brothers growing up. Jacob is a mild man, dwelling in tents, the enclosed, protected space. But his older brother Esau is a skillful hunter, a man of the SADEH. Esau embodies the environment he lives in. He is wild, unpredictable, and perfectly comfortable with the violence of the open plain. That single word changes everything about how we read the murder of Abel. Cain did not just pick a random spot to strike his brother. He calculated the geography. He lured Abel out of the family encampment, away from the protective structures of their father, and into the one place where the rules of civilization evaporated. In a walled city, you are protected by human engineering. In the SADEH, you are protected by nothing but the mercy. The soil opens its mouth. The first blood soaks into the dry earth. And only one brother walks back, of whoever finds you. The SADEH is not just an agricultural plot. It is the realm of total, unwalled exposure. It is the proving ground where human control stops and vulnerability begins. But this absolute lack of walls works in two directions. Because if the SADEH is the place where you are most vulnerable to a predator, it is also the place where you are most open to heaven. And, generations later, another man will walk into that exact same open expanse, right as the daylight begins to fail. The sun drops low over the Negev. Long shadows stretch across the dust. A solitary man walks away from the tents. He leaves the noise of the camp. He leaves the safety of the known. He steps into the wild, open SADEH. Isaac is waiting for a wife. He is waiting for a future. He is waiting for a promise he cannot control. Abraham's servant has been gone for weeks. There are no messengers. There are no updates. There is only the vast silence of the ancient Near East. Isaac does not pace inside his father's courtyard. He does not sit safely behind a perimeter. He walks out into the unprotected expanse. The Hebrew text says he goes out to meditate in the evening. The word is suach. It can mean to ponder. The murder of Abel does not happen in a house. It does not happen in a city or a temple. It happens in the field. It can mean to complain. It can mean to pray. But the location is the message. The silence is heavy. The air cools on his sun-baked skin. He is entirely alone. He has no walls to guard him. He has no roof to cover him. He is standing in the exact same geographical vulnerability that got Abel killed. And then he lifts his eyes. Dust rises on the horizon. Shapes emerge from the twilight. The faint, rhythmic sound of brass bells carries on the evening wind. The camels are coming. Rebecca is riding on one of them. Isaac meets his bride in the exact same terrain where Abel met his death. The SADEH is not a fortress you build. It is a surrender you practice. When you strip away the walls, you remove your defenses, but you also remove your barriers. You are exposed to the blade, but you are also exposed to the blessing. The open field forces absolute reliance. You cannot lock the gate. You cannot pull up the drawbridge. You cannot negotiate your terms. You can only stand in the tall grass and wait to see what comes over the horizon. God meets people in the SADEH because the SADEH is where human engineering fails. It is where you stop relying on what you built. It is where you realize you are not in control. In the biblical imagination, this specific location becomes the original crime scene, but it does not stay that way. Abel was violently taken in the field. Isaac quietly receives his life in the field. Same Hebrew word. Same physical vulnerability. Same lack of walls. The field amplifies whatever walks into it. If violence walks into the SADEH, it becomes a tragedy. If trust walks into the SADEH, it becomes a revelation. But this pattern of exposure does not stop with the patriarchs. The danger of the open ground is about to become a matter of literal starvation, because centuries later, another figure will step into a different field, and she will not be walking out to meditate. She will be walking out to survive. The ancient legal codes of Israel contain a highly unusual economic mandate regarding the SADEH. When you read the book of Leviticus, you find a command that directly attacks human greed and redefines the concept of private property. God instructs the Israelites that when they reap the harvest of their land, they must not reap all the way to the edges of the field. They are legally required to leave the margins untouched. They are commanded to drop the stray sheaves and leave them in the dirt, by divine decree. The corners of the SADEH belong to the poor, the orphan, the widow, and the foreigner. This was an ancient economic safety net, but it required the vulnerable to walk out into the open to claim it. The exact same open space, where the first blood is spilled, is the terrain where a patriarch will first lay eyes on his bride. The Book of Ruth operates entirely on this social reality. Ruth is all of those vulnerable categories wrapped into one human being. She is a widow, she is destitute, and she is a Moabite foreigner living in Bethlehem. When she volunteers to go out and glean among the ears of grain, she is stepping into the absolute exposure of the ancient agrarian world. She is walking into the blinding heat, listening to the sharp scrape of iron sickles, bending down for hours to gather the dry rustle of leftover barley stalks. She has no male protector. She is entirely at the mercy of the landowners and the hired hands in a space without walls. If watching these ancient texts reveal their hidden structures is stirring up questions you have never considered, you are exactly who this channel is for. Drop a thought in the comments and hit subscribe. Because every week we go deeper into the text than you knew was possible. So Boaz arrives at his property. He sees the Moabite woman gleaning in his margins, and his response rewrites the rules of the open ground. He does not invite her into a walled house or a fortified city. He protects her right there in the exposure. He commands his young men not to touch her, removing the threat of violence. He tells her to drink from the water jars his workers have drawn. It is the same ground where a destitute, foreign widow will gather barley and secure a royal bloodline, removing the threat of the brutal son. He elevates her from a scavenger to an honored guest, right in the middle of the dust and the labor. Boaz transforms the danger of the open expanse into a sanctuary. The margins of the harvest are not a charity program. They are the architecture of grace. God designed the SADEH so that the people with no walls to protect them could still find a place to survive. The vulnerability of the open field becomes the exact mechanism for Ruth's redemption, placing a destitute foreigner directly into the debt bloodline of the Messiah. But the field is not always a place of quiet romance or agricultural law. Sometimes, the exposure of the SADEH becomes the staging ground for the most absurd financial transaction in biblical history. The siege ramps are stacked against the stone walls. The Babylonian army surrounds Jerusalem. You can hear the heavy, rhythmic thud of battering rams. You can smell the ash of burning villages drifting over the parapets. The soldiers are starving. The king is panicking. The walls are buckling. The streets are filled with the terrified cries of a doomed people. The year is 587 BC. The nation is collapsing. And the prophet Jeremiah sits locked in a prison courtyard. God gives him a bizarre command. His cousin Hanamel is coming to visit. It is the same landscape where a weeping prophet will purchase a useless piece of real estate while a Babylonian army tears down the city walls. He is going to offer Jeremiah a piece of land, SADEH. It is located in Anathoth, just a few miles outside the city gates. There is just one massive problem. Anathoth is already occupied by the Babylonians. The enemy is literally camped on it. It is a worthless, blood-soaked plot of war-torn dirt. Buying it is economic suicide. But Hanamel walks into the prison courtyard. He makes the pitch. Buy my field. And Jeremiah says yes. He weighs out 17 shekels of silver. You can hear the cold metal clink in the balance scales. He writes the deed on a parchment scroll. He seals it with hot clay. He presses his signet ring into the seal. He calls witnesses to sign it. He places the document in an earthenware jar, packing it tight so it survives the coming fire. He buys a field he cannot visit. He buys a field he cannot farm. He buys a field completely swallowed by an unstoppable pagan empire. Most people look at this scene and see the actions of a madman. Why buy land when the world is ending? Why spend your last silver on a war zone? But this purchase is not a real estate transaction. It is a prophecy written in silver. Jeremiah is making a profound statement about the SADEH. The walled city of Jerusalem is about to be reduced to rubble,